The one and only time I ever dared to use an Ouija board, I was a teenager, and the memory of that night still gives me shivers. It was a dark and stormy night, with the rain drumming on the windows. My friend and I, driven by curiosity, huddled on my back porch with only a single candle's dim flicker to fend off the darkness. The ominous atmosphere was enough to make the bravest souls quiver. At that point in my life, death was an abstract concept. The only connection I had to it was an unsettling portrait that hung in our living room. A stern-looking great-aunt named Neil. Her name had always felt oddly out of place, more fitting for a man than a woman. As we placed our trembling fingers on the Ouija boards, an unsettling energy filled the air. The moment I opened my mouth, something not of this world seized control. My voice, a mere puppet, proclaimed, "Aunt Connie." The room grew colder, and an uninvited presence seemed to loom. I tried to regain control, desperately thinking Neil in my mind, but the words that escaped me were, "I'm trying to speak with Aunt Connie." Despite the creeping dread, we pressed on. The Ouija board, illuminated only by the wavering candle, spelled out cryptic messages. When my mother returned from her errands hours later, she brought with her a breath of sanity. But as soon as I revealed my strange error, uttering the name Connie, her face paled. With a tremor in her voice, she confessed the truth. I did have an Aunt Connie, and she was no ordinary relative. Connie had been a fragile infant, cruelly claimed by sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, many years before I was born. To make it even eerier, my mother had considered naming me after her. This moment hung in the room like a haunting specter. That night, we had unwittingly stirred something beyond our understanding. A sinister door had been opened, and its threshold could not be reclosed. After that terrifying experience, I vowed never to touch a Ouija board again. The memories of that night, the inexplicable horrors that unfolded, and the ghostly connection to Aunt Connie were enough to keep me far away from such dark and mysterious realms. The dread from that fateful night still lingers, a chilling reminder that some doors are best left locked. I've had some really strange and scary experiences that started back when I was a moody 15, 18-year-old girl. It's like something got turned on during those years, and it hasn't turned off since. Some of the scariest things that ever happened to me were during that time. This horrifying experience unfolded during the late summer of 2011 in a European country, a setting where English was not the primary language. I was just 15 years old at the time, and the experience I had with my friend remains etched in my memory, a haunting specter of the past. We embarked on an experiment, a game that we created together by watching movies that sent shivers down our spines. I had meticulously drawn a makeshift board on a large piece of paper, and the room was dimly lit with candles. We entered a sort of meditative state, and I was the conduit for the otherworldly encounter. We employed a small shot glass, turned upside down, as our instrument. The recollections of our first questions and my initial reaction have since faded, obscured by the passage of time. Sitting on the floor in my room, we placed the board on a rectangular subwoofer that served as an improvised table. Our fingers lightly touched the glass, his at 12 o'clock, mine at 6. We soon discovered that if either of us attempted to influence the glass, it moved in an awkward, unsettling manner. We began our communion with the enigmatic entity, lifting the glass and whispering into it. "Is there someone that wants to communicate with us?" We placed it back down on the designated start circle, and the glass moved to yes. Our curiosity propelled us to ask for a name, and thus began a series of questions and answers. The entity identified itself as Lars and stated that it had passed away in 1947. Strangely, Lars had no connection to the building we were in. I couldn't recall if we asked him more questions, but I eventually bid farewell and expressed my gratitude, dismissing the experience as mundane. However, the inexplicable thirst for knowledge drove me to continue. I began asking questions, numbering from 6 to 9, with 9 receiving a no response. So we settled for the 8th dimension. Is there someone from the 8th dimension that we can communicate with? I inquired. It said, yes. What's your name? I asked. ONKU. How old are you? The glass glided over a makeshift numpad, quickly spelling out figures starting with 4, 3, and so on. It conveyed that this entity was over 400,000 years old. Intrigued, my friend and I began a barrage of questions, some personal, some scientific, all profoundly fascinating. The communication was remarkable. The glass moved with a sharp and clear intent, as if someone invisible was firmly controlling it, guiding it to each letter. Sometimes it spelled words so rapidly that we struggled to keep up and lost the meaning. But I yearned for something more, something tangible. Can you show us a visual sign? I asked, and it said, yes. I was hesitant about any strange happenings occurring inside my room, so I inquired, can you show us something outside if we go onto the balcony? And it showed, yes. Should we go outside now? No. We asked more unrelated questions, and after about 5 minutes, I posed the query once more. Is it time for us to go outside now? Yes. With a mix of anticipation and trepidation, my friend and I rose from our seats and ventured onto the balcony. We had an, all right, don't know what to expect, but here we go attitude. It was nearly dawn, around 4 a.m. in mid-August. The streetlights were extinguished, but the early light of dawn dimly illuminated the scene. From our second-floor apartment, we spotted something that initially seemed like a rock behind a small shed across the road, to the right of the resident parking lot. However, our hearts froze as we realized it wasn't a rock but a black cat, crouched in an almost trance-like state, staring at something hidden behind the shed, beyond our view. The cat suddenly shifted to the left, and we watched, our eyes locked on its every movement. It finally positioned itself directly in front of us, slipping beneath one of the parked cars. Just as it settled, an intense white orb of light appeared about 6 feet above the ground. This orb seemed to materialize out of thin air, its size resembling that of a basketball. The light emitted was a pure, unwavering white, devoid of reflection or any shimmer. It wasn't glaring, but rather it seemed like a puncture in the fabric of space-time. The orb moved swiftly with a subtle, graceful sweep and vanished as abruptly as it had arrived. My friend and I exchanged shocked glances. His mouth hung open and my heart raced. We both gazed back at the same spot, and almost instantly the orb reappeared as if to confirm our shared vision. This time it executed a longer, purposeful arc, originating from the right. We remained spellbound for about 10 minutes before finally retreating indoors. I couldn't help but ask, was the orb of light the sign we requested? The answer was yes. It wasn't a terror-inducing experience, but rather an overwhelming sense of wonder and amazement that washed over us. This remarkable connection had forever etched itself in our memories. I haven't summoned the board since that last time in 2014. The mysterious orb of light remained a unique encounter, never to be replicated, leaving us with a sense of fascination and a lingering sense of the inexplicable. Throughout my life, I've often thought about ending it all. Every time I've asked a board how I might die, it has replied with, by suicide. It's not the kind of scary that gives you goosebumps, but it's definitely unsettling. My friends who knew about my struggles were usually there when we played with the board. It makes me wonder if they were just joking around with me. It's almost like a dark inside joke among us. But the most frightening experience I had with the board, in terms of how it made me feel, happened in my friend's room. She had been going through a scary time in that room, saying she was bothered by a bad spirit every night. We both felt things that others might not, making us more sensitive to spooky stuff. When we started using the Ouija board, it felt like we were in touch with something really dark and creepy. Maybe it was because we already knew about her scary experiences, but the spirit was aggressive and wouldn't answer our questions. Out of nowhere, I began to feel really bad. I've had panic attacks before, but it had been a while. and I'd never had one while playing with the board. Suddenly, I got all tingly, started sweating a lot, and my heart was racing. I had to speak up. "We have to leave, I need to go outside." Oddly, the planchette, which had been all over the place, now spelled out "no" very clearly. My friends agreed, and we tried to say goodbye, but the spirit didn't want us to go. After some effort, we managed to get the board to say goodbye, and we got out of there. Once I was outside, my panic feeling disappeared. It was like the fear stayed in the room. Later that day, as I was leaving my friend's house, something pushed me while I was going down the stairs. I was lucky to land on my butt and slide down the stairs without getting hurt, even though it was kind of funny. Another strange thing the board told us was when we talked to a little girl from the other side. It wasn't really scary, just sad. She said she couldn't see us. All she could see was darkness around her. She couldn't remember anything about her life or how she passed away, but she could remember her dog. It was really sad and still makes me think. I'm a skeptic, which means I don't usually believe in these things, but there's a part of me that wants to believe in the unknown and things we can't explain. The mysteries of the paranormal still interest me, even if they give me the creeps.